afternoon, everyone. I'm Asa Heiken. I'm a tech reporter at AdAge, and I'm happy to welcome each and every one of you to the next installment of our Gen Z Voices virtual series. Today, we'll be centering our conversation on gaming. We'll be discussing how younger generations feel about monetization inside of video games, updates on the metaverse, community and subcultures, and what all this means for brands. And of course, you'll be hearing about these topics from Gen Zers themselves, including me, who barely but technically makes the cutoff. A final note to everyone tuning in today. If you have questions for our panel, please leave them in the comments and we will try to get to them during the conversation. Thanks to those who have already submitted questions for this panel. Now, I'd like to welcome our three panelists, each of whom is situated in a different corner of the games marketing industry. We have Parker Bennett, Associate Manager of Brand Partnerships at GameFam.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Nicholas Budler, Account Supervisor of Digital Strategy at Edelman.
Morning.
And Idan Saban, a game designer at StarWorks, who is also studying game design and production at Drexel University.
Hey, guys.
So thank you all for being here. And I'd like to start with a question that I've always been curious about. This is for everyone. So we'll start with Nicholas and then go to Parker and then Idan. Do most Gen Zers prefer games that reflect realism, or is non-realism considered the more interesting content?
I think it depends on the person. I think there's a lot of difference in the experiences that people have had over the last couple of years through COVID even, and sort of coming out of that have shaped what they're looking for in games. I think the divide between sort of like hyper realism, if that's what you're interested in, versus the escapism, sort of like depends what you and your friends and the experiences that you've had are shaping. So I think both are interesting. I think it depends on what the game is and sort of how it's being marketed and sort of what are the ways in which people are accessing the game. But personally, I lean towards the hyper-realism, but I see the appeal also in sort of the escapism and the rest as well.
Parker?
Yeah, really great question. On the platforms we primarily build on at GameFam, Fortnite, Roblox, Minecraft, it really depends on the game itself, and then of course the brand we're working with. Some brands work really great in high fidelity worlds, as where other brands will work a lot better in blocky worlds. Some players on Roblox and Fortnite prefer the high fidelity worlds. Some players prefer the blocky worlds. There's a lot of really good high fidelity worlds players like to explore and like to play in. Players tend to really jump around between the high fidelity worlds and blocky worlds we see on Roblox and Fortnite. Fortnite leans towards a higher fidelity platform, like more of the worlds are high fidelity on Fortnite, whereas Roblox, you really see a mix of the two. Both from a brand POV as well as a overall game POV. So players are really open to either of the high fidelity or blocky worlds we see on either platform.
Don.
Yeah, so I don't really think there's a super clear-cut answer. I think both categories contain very successful games. You have games like FIFA and GTA for realism, and then games like Roblox and Minecraft for non-realism. I will say that generally it'll be a little bit easier to get a casual gamer on board with a realistic game, just because there might be a little more familiarity there. But I think in the end, the most important thing is both the quality and the marketability of the game. And I think those are the main factors that will contribute to a successful release rather than whether it's realistic or non-realistic.
So Idan, let's stay with you. As a game designer, how do you think about the metaverse? This is obviously was a popular concept, but it's sort of, there's fatigue around it. How has your thinking changed at all in the time since that word and others like NFT and Web3 were popular a couple of years ago?
Yeah, so I definitely say for the metaverse, there's a lot of great things about it. I think there's a lot of potential in the idea of a virtual space that you could run around in, talk to friends, just do anything you would want to do in the real world, but in the virtual space. I do think there is a lot of potential in that idea. I do think right now there just isn't that widespread appeal for it. I don't think there's enough of a reason. I know personally, as someone who's part of Gen Z, the metaverse isn't really part of any cultural or social spaces I'm part of or any of my friends are a part of. But I think it can get there eventually. I just think the barrier to entry is a little high right now to get the full experience of the metaverse. You need something like a VR headset, which again is another barrier to that entry point.
Parker, you work a lot with games that are often considered proto-metaverse. How are you thinking about that concept, and do you find it useful?
Yeah, I mean, we're really seeing a lot of kids these days and Gen Z and Gen Alpha hanging out on these metaverse platforms, Roblox and Fortnite primarily. 77 million daily active users on Roblox. Players were spending an average of over 2 hours per day on Roblox. That's more than TikTok, YouTube, or Instagram. The trend we're seeing is part of their lives, right? So they go to school, they come home, they go soccer practice, and then they come back on Roblox and play and hang out with their friends. Rather, 5 or 10 years ago, we're going to the mall, hanging out with our friends. They go to these platforms to hang out with their friends, jump around from their games they like to play and hang out with their friends on Roblox, make new friends on Roblox. And they're really using these platforms, these metaverse UGC gaming platforms, as their social hangout, like the new malls, think of them, to go hang out with their friends, explore new worlds they can explore, and of course shop virtual merch to show off to their friends and equip on their avatar. So we're really seeing I think a big increase in having these metaverse and UGC platforms be a core part of Gen Z and Gen Alpha's everyday lives, because this is where they're going to socialize, play with their friends, and explore new worlds.
So you mentioned UGC a couple times, and I think this is a good time to bring in an audience question from Daniel in Los Angeles. And I'll give this to you, Nicholas. He says, big brand ideas versus creator content. How do you see this mix changing for gaming in the next 1 to 2 years?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I think it is and will continue to be a combination of the two. I think sort of the way that big ideas definitely center on or come from the brands, and then sort of the creators are the disseminators of that trusted sort of message. And I think that's a trend we'll continue to see. We at Edelman are seeing a lot of trust in sort of micro influencers and smaller influencers. And I think that level of trust to drive sort of a big idea, whether it be in a game or elsewhere, people are looking for people who represent them, who reflect their values, who are similar to them, to sort of trust in. And whether or not that's in the game or not, I think we'll see creators be sort of the bastion of that trust going forward and carrying those big ideas forward to their audience. And then the emphasis is on the brands to sort of pick the right creators who are going to speak to their audience, who are going to deliver that message. So I think we'll continue to see it. I think they're going to stay paired together. But I think especially in this space, creators are going to continue to play a really important role in carrying those messages and ideas forward.
So when we think about how gaming and metaverse activations have evolved over the past couple of years, you've gone from what I sort of see as top of funnel focus to lower funnel focus for marketers. So Parker, you've worked with a bunch of brands on platforms like Roblox and Fortnite. What are some ways that brands can tie their games back to sort of these lower funnel objectives, real world objectives, such as driving conversions and purchases?
Yeah, I mean, I think the primary answer to this question is really finding a way to integrate your brand into the game in a natural and engaging way that players will want to come into the game, want to experience your brand, and want to play with your brand, opposed to just sticking it in and players see it as an ad. If they jump into the game and they see it as a fun, engaging integration that they want to come and play with their friends with, they're more likely to associate your brand with a positive relation opposed to, oh, they're going into the game and it's just an ad there. A really great example of this is a integration we did into one of our Fortnite maps called Dead Pines for a movie called Talk to Me. The data shows that players playing the game drove a really big real world increase on players actually going to the theaters and seeing the movie. Another great example of this is a activation we did around the Super Bowl last year, which we did integrations across multiple of our games in our portfolio where players could go in and play the Super Bowl within the game they were in. So, for example, in a game we own called Easy Obby, we rebranded the entire game Super Bowl themed. Players were able to go in, jump through the obby like they were participating in the Super Bowl in the game in a natural and engaging way. And the Super Bowl last year had record-breaking broadcast numbers and the record-breaking Gen Z and Gen Alpha audiences. So really integrating your brand in a fun and engaging way into these games and finding the right development partner that will be able to do that for you is a very important way to drive conversions and drive an increase in real life by doing these virtual marketing campaigns.
So does it sounds like entertainment brands, or at least activations centered around entertainment events, they sort of lend themselves particularly to getting engagement from these virtual games and bringing them outside. Is that true? And is the same tactics apply to brands that aren't marketing around some piece of entertainment, but rather marketing around, apparel or a different kind of product?
I mean, yeah, each brand is going to have a different goal of coming into one of our games or doing an integration. For example, it's really important to find a good development partner that will be able to integrate you in the right way or create a standalone game. Every brand's different. Every brand's going to have a different solution. Some brands, standalone game might be better for their objective. Some brands, an integration might be better for their objective. For example, we created a few of the largest brand games, Sonic Speed Simulator and Barbie Dream Tycoon, the largest brand games on Roblox. Their objectives aligned to creating a standalone game, and those worked really well. Whereas example of an integration that worked very well is the Super Bowl thing I mentioned, where the NFL, Paramount were looking to drive more viewers to their Super Bowl broadcast, and we did a cross promo campaign across multiple of our games that helped drive viewers to the Super Bowl in a fun and engaging way that players really enjoyed.
Idan, what are your thoughts on how younger consumers feel about these kinds of monetization efforts by brands and maybe even more direct monetization efforts, such as offering in-game purchases? Are these younger consumers seeking out these touch points, or are they repulsed by them?
I think it's a really interesting question because it really depends on what those purchases are. We've seen through a lot of games in recent times that the Battle Pass is a really great sort of monetization plan to go for, just because it's a low investment for the player. However, gives them both a lot of content to experience within the game and a lot of really awesome rewards within the game to get through that content. So I think that's a really great way to go about doing microtransactions. But recently, the game League of Legends just announced a new skin commemorating one of their famous pro players, but the cost of it was $500, which is an insane amount of money, and there was tons of outrage over it through all the player base, just because it's almost insulting to them that they would even think that anyone would spend that kind of money on a cosmetic in the game. So I think it really depends on how tactfully the company goes ahead and does it. I think if it's something low investment that the players can interact with, it's going to be a much hotter commodity and a lot more players will want to interact with it. But if it's something that's a clear cash grab that feels more of an insult, you're not going to get a lot of people on board with that, and you might end up hurting your brand more than helping it.
Could you elaborate on the Battle Pass you brought up earlier, just for audience members that may not really know what that is?
Yeah, so a lot of live service games, which are games that get constant updates and content, will include something called the Battle Pass, which is pretty much something you could pay for with real money. And in turn, you'll get many tiers to complete. Each tier will give you different rewards. It could be stuff like emotes, sprays, skins, currencies within the game. And it takes a couple weeks to complete the battle pass. And through its completion, again, you get all those rewards. So it gives the players both content to play for and rewards to get, which I think is a really nice balance to strike.
Nicholas, any thoughts on how younger consumers are sort of digesting monetization efforts and appropriate ways that brands can sort of go about that?
Yeah, I think if you are familiar with Edelman, we talk a lot about trust, and for me, this is the start of that conversation. Like, it's not necessarily just about the ad in the game, but it's about that full ecosystem of trust around a brand. So starting even way before the game, way before somebody interacts with that ad or that skin, like, how is the brand being perceived? How are they showing up in social? How are their employees feeling about the company? Like, Gen Z is seeking out information like never before on brands that they want to support. We're seeing that across the board. And so when those brands are showing up in an intimate space, like a space where they're looking for that escapism, it has to be really authentic, and it has to like have this sort of backing of previous trust building. And I think, the guys hit it perfectly earlier, like the way in which it comes across in the game. It has to be authentic. It has to be fun, obviously, but I think there's a lot more to the back end of all of this. It's not just about like showing up and putting an ad in a game. It's like, what are we doing as an entire company to reach these young people? And if it's the right place, sort of the right time, the right ad in the game, that's totally fine. And I think, young people are interested in going after those skins, after those emotes, like all of that stuff, and they're willing to pay for it. But it starts way before all of that, with the brand doing sort of the right thing beforehand.
And do any of you have any thoughts on how, some brands like luxury retailers, a lot of their products are particularly expensive? Is even the idea for these kinds of brands with some of premium products, when they show up on these platforms, should they still be catering to that sort of lower dollar kind of target for these players, or is there some room to place their kind of more premium products and those premium prices in the games themselves? We can start with Parker on this.
Yeah, I definitely think there is. In Roblox, for example, we have these items called UGC items, user-generated content. And these are items that players are able to purchase and equip on their avatar and bring around every single game on Roblox. The millions of experiences that developers have created on Roblox. And you're able to set limited quantities of these items on Roblox, and these items are extremely valuable to players. Players love to unlock these items, equip them on their avatar, and show them off to their friends and other players on the platform. So if a luxury brand wants to come onto Roblox, create 100 jackets, for example, that players will be able to unlock, only 100 people would be able to have those jackets. 100 players would be able to equip them on their avatar and show them off to their friends. That's very high value to players, and players really enjoy unlocking those virtual merch items to really show off to their friends, equip on their avatar, and customize the way they look and appear in game. And then adding on to that, they're able to take those items in game, show them off in game, complete quests in game. For example, if you want have a full brand integration in the game tied back to those virtual merch items, players could go in the game, complete the brand integration. By completing the brand integration, unlock some of those exclusive virtual merch items.
Yeah, those limited items, their scarcity, that aspect is almost reminiscent of NFTs, but I guess the whole technological foundation is completely different.
Exactly. Yep.
So for anyone just tuning in, I'm Asa Hyken. I'm here with Parker Bennett, Nicholas Budler, and Idan Saban talking about Gen Z and gaming. Feel free to let us know in the chat where you're tuning in from. And if you have any questions for our panelists, ask them here and we'll try to get to them at the end. Nicholas, coming to you now, how do you tend to think about the Gen Z gaming community that is, do you sort of view it in terms of, a one size, almost as one big group, sort of Gen Z gamers? Do you think about it in terms of the subcultures? Do you think about it in terms of another kind of demographic? Like, how do you break it down and categorize?
Yeah, I mean, I think no generation is a monolith, and although every other generation seems to provide those wide sweeping labels, but I think for Gen Z in particular, we're seeing that they are sort of gravitating towards the pieces that make up their whole more than other generations. So, it's okay to have a wide variety of interests. It's okay to have a wide variety of games that you play. Like there's no set sort of, there's less prescription for what it means to be a Gen Zer. And I think, we've even talked about it on this call, like there seems to be differences from the older side of Gen Z to the younger side. And so we're seeing a lot of this gravitation towards subcultures, like I'm a small piece of this and I'm a small piece of that and I'm a small piece of this, and all of that's okay. And we're seeing sort of that reflected in what people are interested in as gamers, the games that they're playing, the way that they are seeking out brands, and the way that they're interacting with each other. So I think we'll continue to see that, like people are okay to just like have these little niches and to have, different subcultures and groups. And we're definitely seeing sort of that come through in this space.
Do you mind just giving any examples of subcultures that you've identified? And these can be really niche, these don't have to be really niche, but just to get a sense of how we're breaking this down.
Yeah, I think we're seeing people like sort of have a bunch of labels for themselves. So you might be into, the FIFA side of the gaming thing. You might, play FIFA with the friends that you had in college, let's say, and you have that sort of part of your personality that like gravitates back towards that time in your life, right? And then maybe during COVID, you got really close to a bunch of random strangers on the internet because you were playing Minecraft and you got close to them on Discord. And that's like a totally different part of who you are. And then maybe you're a woman or you identify as a person of color. And I think those subcultures exist inside of the FIFA and the Discord with the Minecraft, right? And so I think we're seeing sort of the way people are going towards those different groups and finding others who are similar to them and sort of who represent them in games as well as in real life as well.
Now, Idan, even if brands can sort of properly conceptualize Gen Z gamers and break them down into appropriate buckets, in your mind, can they actually avoid being seen as interlopers through their branded activations and advertising efforts? Or is there a level of acceptance required for these marketers that players just aren't going to be happy that they're there, and they sort of need to reduce that dissatisfaction as much as possible?
Yeah, so I think it's just really important with how it's done and how your ads are portrayed within the game. I think that having games isn't a major issue when done well and tactfully. If I'm buying a $60 or $70 game, I probably wouldn't want to see any ads in those. I find that pretty frustrating. But if I'm playing a free online service game, I could see ads fitting in somewhere there. If it's, however, like I wouldn't want to see like pop-ups or anything like that, no matter the kind of games. But I think definitely the best way to put advertisements within a game would probably be integrating them into the world somehow. Whether that's as simple as having like a billboard in the game that like shows your product or something somewhere on the map, or if it's something more in depth like items or quests that can relate to your product. Just any way where the player can actually interact with your product in a very meaningful way that does not disrupt their gameplay, I think would be a really great way to go about doing advertisements and handling that.
So here's an audience question on this topic submitted anonymously. And let's start with you, Idan, and then we'll go to Parker and then Nicholas. What are your thoughts on advertisers like Shell, Chevron, MilkPep, and others using this space to lobby for their interests with the younger audience? Do they have a right to pay to be in this space too, or should this all be more regulated?
I think advertisers have a right to be in the gaming space, but I think it's really important to balance commercial interests with your gaming experience. Advertisement can provide great financial support for game game development and enhance the gaming ecosystem, I think it's very important to have advertisements. Without them, our favorite games wouldn't exist. But I think it's really important to make sure the practices are ethical and don't exploit or disrupt anything within the gaming environment.
Yeah, I definitely second that. As we know, it's still the very early days of especially UGC and metaverse gaming on Roblox and Fortnite, and having brands come in to those. It's really important to us that we're working with our partners to make sure they come in as safely and ethical as possible, especially that we're advertising to younger age players. We work very closely with Karu, which is the Children's Advertising Review Unit. We are actually the first metaverse developer that's an official partner with Karu. We collaborate with them to come up with the first ever guidelines to allow brands to safely advertise in the metaverse. And Karu is great at getting ahead of these things as an advertiser. Comes in and looks to advertise in Roblox or Fortnite, and we work closely with Karu as well as our partners to make sure the advertisers are coming in a safe, ethical, and positive way for players. And that includes, like you mentioned, coming in a brand integration versus simple display ads, and actually adding value to players and adding to their enjoyment when they come in and play the game.
Nicholas, any thoughts?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think as an agency in general, it's our job to sort of push clients, towards responsibility and taking action in the right way. And so I think we sort of see our role in this as like an opportunity to help guide. I think there's a lot of trust in this space, and like it's got to be an authentic place to show up, as has been said before in this call. But I think there is an opportunity for everyone to be involved if it's the right target, it's the right audience. But I think it also, again, it matters what's going on around the game. It's not just about the ad in the game. It's about the brand's perception in the world. It's about what the brand's doing elsewhere. And so I think, as somebody mentioned before too, it's like there's opportunity to do more harm than good for your brand if you're just like haphazardly tossing ads in all over the place, and there's already sort of this negative perception towards the brand. Like there's other work that needs to be done for that ad to land. And I think as an agency, that's where we can help push and like make sure that the ecosystem around this one specific ad is the right ecosystem to build that trust with younger consumers.
So we got just under 2 minutes left and time for one more question. This is an audience question from Gertrude on YouTube. We talked about how brands show up on social. The gaming community is very different on social, and brands seem to always miss the mark. Any examples of brands that have done it well on Reddit, Discord, Twitch, or others? And we'll start with Nicholas on this, then go to Parker, and finish with Don.
Yeah, I need a second to think about examples, but I think you're right to say that the community is very different, and our sort of approach with clients too is like, let's get really specific, let's get really authentic, let's make sure that we're reaching, the right audience in the right place. So Reddit, Discord, Twitch, great examples of places to reach gaming audiences in those spaces. Like showing up in the way we talk about it as showing up in the way and in the place that people already are, sort of meeting them where they are. But let's let the guys talk through examples, and I'll come back to it if I can think of something.
Cool.
Yeah.
Parker.
Really great question. We actually just wrapped up a massive integration around the Garfield movie, helping Sony promote the new Garfield movie that came out. And with this integration, we integrated into 4 of our largest game titles that we own and operate on Roblox. And in addition to that, we had multiple influencers do live streams around the integration and help engage their fans, both on Discord, YouTube. So the influencers would live stream the event, hop into the event, and really encourage their fans to come play the Garfield event with them, which helped drove massive traffic to the integration as well as promote the Garfield movie. So we're seeing a really positive impact from using these social platforms in collaboration with the in-game integrations to help drive traffic to the integrations as well as the objectives.
Any Don?
Yeah, something that comes to mind that came up relatively recently was a collaboration that the game Genshin Impact did with Discord, where pretty much the objective was you had to stream the game to some friends through Discord, and for that you get some bonuses within the game. And I think that's a really, really great way to go about doing it. As someone previously said, just hosting your brand and all of your advertisements within the platforms players already use is really the best way, I think, to kind of connect to people and get those conversions. Just because people know what they like and they like to be where they're known. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind.
Great. Any final thoughts, anyone? All right. Well, that is our time for today. A big thank you to Parker, Nicholas, and Idan for joining me. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. If you'd like to stay up to date on how marketers are approaching video games and Gen Z, be sure to follow AdAge's daily coverage. And thanks again, everyone.